Three, two, one, go.
All right, we're going. Today we have Bill Sell. We want to do our little shout out.
Oh, yeah, we got to
here.
do our shout outs.
Yeah.
You can check us out on YouTube, BitChute, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Music.
Mm-hmm.
Come
like
check
us,
out.
subscribe us. If you want to see someone on, let us know. Today we have on Bill Sell.
Bill Sell. What was so like the first thoughts when I did reach out and you saw my message and like we asked you to come on the podcast? 'Cause I right when you had messaged me, I'm like, I wonder what he's thinking when I.
Well, to be honest, when I came in here and I ran into you, I thought these guys must be really bored if they're asking me, to fill in for them. But honestly, I have a real love of history and the region, so I thought it was a cool idea. I didn't know how it was going to work or what the format would be like, but since I enjoy, like I said, not just genealogy, but history, and the older I get, like families and how they interact in the community. Yeah. So I said, I'm in.
Awesome.
And it seems like this area especially has a whole lot of respect for that, like genealogy. Like my aunts are all about it. You know, Cindy, she can go deep on our family tree.
That's good.
And other people's in like Maria Stein and Celina, she's all about it.
When I first moved here, that was 1978, and I started teaching, I realized very quickly, be careful what you say, because everyone is definitely related somehow, know. And in fact, I think my first week of teaching, there was this girl who had a very common local last name, and she came up to me after class and she said, "But I want you to know, Mr. Sell, that I'm from the good Smiths." And I said, well, to be honest, I don't know the good from the bad. So, I mean, I just am going to judge everybody on their own merit because you'll find out that there's, and she was kind of right as time went on.
Well, you probably saw that a lot as being a teacher, as you see a lot of like generations of families or at least siblings.
Right.
And, I think you taught both my older sisters.
Yes, I did. And a lot of your
cousins.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of times there does seem to be a real common thread. And one thing I noticed, I know it's more than coincidental. If I had a kid sit in the third seat from the window, from the front and the window side, 4 years later, it seems like the younger sibling would sit in the same seat. It's more than just happenstance. Yeah, it was really strange. I said, you remember, who sat there for 3 years ago? So yeah, there's a lot of ties there.
How long did you end up teaching for?
35 years, Celina.
I think I was your last class.
13?
Yeah, I think so, because I had you for Civil
You had
War.
Civil War when you were a sophomore, maybe.
Yeah, that was it. You gave me that stop sign.
Did I? I wonder what happened to that. I want that back, by the way.
That's some valuable stuff.
Yeah, I think I was cleaning up my room.
Yeah,
actually.
and I was just like, hey.
Take this stuff, right.
You said, don't put it up.
Yeah. Be careful, right.
And Bill, you also graduated from OU, right?
Correct.
I did too. Just
I
this
did
year.
Not, well, good for you, man.
I know. Yeah, I was talking to Kevin about it right before I came out here. So Athens.
Yeah, and
Great
it's
place to be.
What a unique place, and it was very unique in the early mid-'70s. I can tell you that. Yeah,
I think a lot of that's still, it's lasted at least in spirit to this point. There's still some. When you see it, that's where I like to hang out.
Right. I read that recent biography called Pioneers by David McCullough, and it talks about the westward expansion and how Ohio got settled. And there was a ton in there about Southern Ohio and Manasseh Cutler, who was a congressman and a minister, and Cutler Hall.
Oh, yeah.
And there was so much history about Athens. I wish I could have read that 45 years ago, because I took all those old buildings and names for granted, but there were people behind those.
I figured it was mostly donors and things like that.
Yeah, it was like really old guys.
The architecture, that school is like just the buildings themselves are just magnificent to look at.
And
it's a pretty sweet campus to walk around in.
Yeah. And those buildings are 215 years old.
Yeah.
1804. It's crazy.
Do you get back often?
No, but I try to go down at least once a summer. I still have family down there. And my grandparents on my mom's side are buried down there, so I take her down there every summer, try to go on Decoration Day, Memorial Day. And I just still love the area,
Oh, it's I'm missing it forever.
And I go down there in the fall deer hunting with a couple of the boys. Yeah.
Good stuff.
My sons.
Good place to do it.
It is.
Did you get any?
Sometimes. And I'm at the age now where I don't care. If I'm just sitting in the woods leaning up against a tree, this is good.
Yeah.
It's a good day.
Right.
Just taking it on the air.
Yeah.
Fresh air.
Love it.
So is that why you went to OU?
Well, my father went there back in the 50s, and that was pretty much the reason. He went there because my mom had family there as kind of a safety net. So 25 years later, I said, I think I want to go here. It's a beautiful campus.
Beautiful, tons of fun, great people.
And I graduated from Upper Arlington in Columbus, and like grade 13 was Ohio State. Everybody that I graduated with, they were just going down Lane Avenue and I said, I don't want to do that. I want to go a little further away. And back then, you could pretty much work in the summers and afford to pay your following year. That's all changed, so that's what happened.
That'd be a big jump for you, though, going from Upper Arlington all the way to Athens. I know some people, at least now, that go from Columbus to Athens don't fit in very well and don't like it.
Right.
That's probably
not
changed so much.
It's tucked away. It's a way different attitude than what Columbus is.
Absolutely.
Columbus probably looks completely different than when you remember it.
Well, I go back there. It's like to take the shortcut over to 350. It's, wait, what happened?
Oh yeah, the lane just looks completely different.
Meanwhile, Athens is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
When I was at Athens in OU, actually the enrollment decreased for like 3 years, and I had to research it. I thought, I wonder why. It was the end of the Vietnam War, so people didn't need to get out of going. So they didn't have to go to school now.
Yeah.
So for like 2 or 3 years, the enrollment actually went down a little bit. So when I was down there, it was 10,000.
Now, in that time period, I just watched Good Morning Vietnam. I like watching Vietnam Wars movies, especially because I feel like it's such a learning moment for America and like politicians. Living in that era, were you stressed?
I was almost too young to be. I graduated from high school in 73, and Kent State was 70, and we did go down to Ohio State campus when all the unrest was going on, like 70, and I was like maybe a freshman, and I was down there long enough to say, we got to get out of here. This is crazy. But I'll tell you, since you guys are kind of into music, the music of that era kind of reflected the social unrest.
It's like Ohio by Crosby.
Crosby's still national, still national, and even like Blowing in the Wind, all that stuff. You listen to the music from that era, and it's like those people, those kids, I'll call them now, they were tuned in to being opposed to the war, and there was social unrest. To be honest, it's kind of like what's going on now. This is like 1969. It's different reasons, but we are very polarized as a society, as a culture in America now. And to be honest, I'm very troubled by it. You can't have a political discussion with people anymore.
Oh no, definitely,
yeah, absolutely,
at all.
And you say that just because you can't say certain things, or
well, everybody's angry within like 30 seconds. The discourse is gone, and it's like they're looking for sharp objects. And say, wait, this is supposed to be.
No one can have their own opinions. It's just like either you share my opinion or get lost.
Right.
Which is just wrong. It's not what America was about. America's about just opinion, like freedom.
And social media is just like throwing gas on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That is the truth.
People are hiding behind it, and it's just very volatile and it's inflammatory, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Is there like a similarity to what's kind of going on when you were growing up, or is there like a big difference? Like, is it worse? Do you think it's worse now, or was it worse then?
To me, it's worse now in the regard that there's not the focal point of Vietnam. It's easy now to look back at the Vietnam War and say, oh, well, that was it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
18, 19, and 20-year-olds are scared to death, and it's no wonder they're throwing rocks and bottles, which was not the answer, by the way.
Right.
But it does at least make some sense. Now it's just, I hate you because you're a Democrat. Well, good, I hate you because you're a Republican.
Right.
And you're left and I'm right. And it's like, well, no, I'm right. No, it's just trying to describe that, and it just spins out of control. So, and it's kind of geographic. You know, people from Mercer County have certain political leanings. People from Columbus and Cincinnati and Athens have different political leanings, you know, and they don't mix, you know, and it's unfortunate that we can't even have a conversation much anymore.
I think they mix more than we want to realize, but I feel like the people who aren't with the majority just stay quiet.
Oh, you're probably right.
Because in Athens, I mean, many of the professors, many of the students, I went to business school, they were pretty right-leaning, even though a majority of the campus, I would argue, is way left. And you could tell in the way that certain professors talked, but if you take an arts class or anything, psychology, anything like that, you'd get more libertarian to like socialist ideas.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's kind of predictable.
Yeah. It is.
But I remember looking at the state of Ohio in the 2016 election, 2012 election, and, you know, red, and then the
Cities.
municipality,
It's small.
blue, and Athens County, blue in a sea of red, and that kind of makes sense too, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of the population is there for the school, especially in Athens.
It's a liberal arts.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I think
didn't think about that.
social media just creates like bigger bubbles of like you're only hearing certain people's opinions because a lot of people just don't follow outside of their view. Right. So they only see the same view all the time.
And I do believe that there's a silent majority of people out there who all believe they just want to do what they want to do in their life and take care of what they're doing in their life, I guess. And it's just this very small minorities really speaking up and really throwing out that.
And it's funny
crap.
you use silent majority because that was Richard Nixon's term in like 68,
Was it
69.
really?
It really was, yeah. And I always used to tell my students that I think most Americans could care less what kind of political system we have.
Yeah.
Whether it's liberal, conservative, and to be honest, whether it was a monarchy or an autocracy, if the tuition was paid at the college for my kids, I get to play golf, she gets to play bridge, the cars in the garage are paid for, who cares? So most people are very apolitical. As long it's more driven by economics to me.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why, like, as you age, you usually come a little more conservative.
But most people, it's like, well, the mortgage is paid for and everything's good, so why should I care?
Yeah.
You know, whether this guy is upholding the Constitution or whether any of that stuff. And like I said, it's hard to have a conversation with people about those kind of things.
Do you think there's any solutions for that problem?
Well, the easy fallback is to say education. But even there, you got to be careful because education is from someone's perspective.
Bias.
Yeah. And someone, you know, my students used to say, well, you know, Mr. Sell, it used to be better when Walter Cronkite was, from what I read, the CBS, everybody believed him because he wasn't biased. I said, he was biased. He was the guy that was in Vietnam and said, we've got to end this war. He had an agenda. So did, you know, Horace Greeley in the New York Tribune when Lincoln was president. He had an agenda. So they all do. They were a little bit more subtle about it than they are now.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Today, it's either, you know, CNN or Fox News, and that's it.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And I think reality is if you shot an arrow down the middle somewhere, you know, there would be closer to the truth. But people then watch whichever they're more inclined to believe, and they reinforce their preconceived ideas, and then there you go.
Do you find yourself watching a lot of like political news stations like that?
Yeah, too much.
It's
Then I get mad and turn them off.
do you flip back and forth, or do you
Yeah, I
stay
try
up?
to.
Yeah.
I try to.
Try to get both sides of it.
Yeah, I really do. And sometimes I want to throw things at the television set, like everybody does. You know?
Yeah, I just stopped watching all of this big news medias because it's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard because, I mean, you talk about having an agenda.
Yeah.
You know, when they're yelling that the president is a liar, you know, and that's coming from a major network. You know, we've kind of crossed over the precipice as far as being diplomatic and subtle, you know, on both sides.
Oh, yeah. We're just too separated. I feel like half of it's just like now we're at like a rural versus urban divide almost.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like 50% of the population lives in the major cities, like 7 of them. And they're all majorly Democratic.
Right. Well, I remember showing again my students the map of Florida after the 2000 election, which was contested forever. That was one of the weird, as a government teacher, going to school on the following Wednesday and not knowing who won, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day. Yeah, it had to go to the Supreme Court to decide who won the state of Florida. whoever won Florida won the election, and that turned out to be George W. Bush.
Wow.
But the state of Florida was all red, except for just a little blue around here and here and here. So I showed it on the old smart board, and the first thing one of the students said, "Well, how could Gore think he won?" And the girl said, "Just a minute. Where do you think that people live?" And so all of it, yeah. And then, the students asked me, "Well, how did you guys get along without these things, which we have to carry with us?" I said, "Better."
Yeah. I feel like we're overstimulated now with them.
Definitely overconnected.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows where you are and what you're doing. Well, maybe what you're doing, but they know where you are for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a weird object that everyone seems to have to have it.
Right.
It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Well, for me, one thing I realize is you guys have much better memories than we do, because I don't have to remember anything.
Right.
If there's something I was supposed to remember, as long as I know a little bit about it, I can just Google it. Done.
Yeah. And remember, the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer were actually spoken.
Yeah.
Before they were written, a 2,000-page book was spoken. And if you read the book, there's like little prompts in there so people could go around telling the stories. Now we can't, tell each other what we had for breakfast yesterday.
Yeah.
So let me check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, it's just like the amount of phone numbers you probably have had to remember rather than we have.
Or how to get to go somewhere.
Exactly.
Or to make change, And I'll be honest, when I was coming out here, it's like, well, just wait a minute. I'm going to Neptune.
Yeah.
I go down 197 and turn left. So, yeah, we fall into that too, but it's not healthy, I don't think.
That's convenient, though.
It is very convenient.
I mean, I struggle with the fact that we should be embracing technology, but at the same time using our human intellect to its fullest, and I don't know how compatible that is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it is. You talk to
It just takes
Tesla
discipline.
Motors, but
Discipline is what it takes.
yeah, put it down, get a book.
Yeah, I like just starting this podcast. Like I realized like my speech and talking to people is so much better. Like I actually communicate better with people than just like when this podcast started, and just afterwards, I just was a lot better.
I used
Not
to
looking at my
teach.
phone all the time.
I was the advisor for mock trial, which was pretty cool, and we would actually have a trial with another high school, and we'd have to be on both sides. We'd have to be defense, and then we'd have to be prosecution. And I would show my students Parliament from England, and I said, "Now watch these guys speak," and they wouldn't stumble with filler words. They just were very good communicators because that's what they do. And you're right, we've kind of lost that as well.
Yeah.
They spoke with gusto.
Yeah.
Like everything they said was just with so much pride.
Right. And it's extemporaneous. They get up to speak and they don't fumble. They just speak.
It's like when I listened to like Churchill speak, and it was just like, didn't stop at all.
Right.
They just knew what they had to say, and they said it.
I love reading like our best statesmen in this country's words. I like reading Lincoln's words when he addressed this, or Roosevelt or Teddy, and all of them have a common theme where they could speak and they could think, which is, I shouldn't say it's a lost art, but it's something like we don't have to depend on anymore like we used to.
Yeah.
Well, now everything's so visual, and I think that takes away. Like those guys' only way to reach people and move people were through either written word or spoken word. So that had to be good.
And that was like my last few years of teaching when we had the smart boards and we had all the techno stuff. It was difficult for me because I was kind of used to lecturing. And they said, well, you only want to do that in 10-minute spots because you'll lose them. Go to the smart board and show them pictures of Lincoln or the Battle of Gettysburg or do this or do that. And I thought, 10 minutes is all they've got.
It's 10 minutes then,
So
2 minutes now.
Yeah.
I loved when you guys stop and just lecture over and over about stories and stories. I learned more about that than actually looking at the smart board and going over the text and everything. I loved listening to you guys talk.
I think there's still a place for it too, and that's what I try to. And no offense to people that are homeschooled, God bless them. That's great. I like the social interaction of a public school, or at least students in the school, but also having someone in the front of the classroom saying, "No, that's not how it's done. To do it right, you have to do it like this." And that person is good in their field, and they know how to do it. And I think that's the way. And I'm biased, but I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care if it's a private school or public school, but just a school setting. And it doesn't necessarily have to be bricks and mortar, but I think it helps that it's a classroom with other people, so there's interaction, and so that one student raises their hand and says, hold on just a minute here. You know, and of course, being in social sciences, I loved that kind of stuff. It's different than math or science or, you know.
What was the what's the biggest difference from when you started teaching until now, or like when you stopped teaching?
Well, it was much more regimented back in those days, you know, when I first started. I remember actually, you know, principals saying, if you hear a kid using language in the hallway, you grab him and you take him into your room and you forcibly tell him, we will not tolerate that type of talk. And if he doesn't listen, you bring him to the office and we'll pound his hind end with a board. You know? And now everybody just be in jail together, you know.
When I was a kid, I went to a private school in Nashville, and I got the paddle once, and I never did the same.
Traumatized.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm not doing that again.
And I'm not even saying that that's the answer. I'm not saying that that's good, but that's the way that it was, you know. And one of my first year students who was in woodshop brought me a paddle. And I remember when he handed it to me thinking, I hope I never have to use this, you know. But that was kind of then. And then also the fact that it was chalk on a chalkboard.
Right.
You know, and that kind of atmosphere as opposed to when I left. You know. We filled out our grades with, you know, pencil and paper and A plus B minus and a C on the final equals. You know, you got to look it up. And we didn't have calculators. I mean, some people did. You know, so it took forever. Now you just boom.
Well, I have an old desk at my house, and it's like it's got the whole logarithmic table on it and everything. And I was just like, boy.
Yeah, I know.
Thank God I didn't have to use that. I was just like, oh boy.
Which kind of prompts the question, where are we going to be in 50 years?
Yeah, that is true.
You know, or they're going to be electric cars. You know, there's going to be
computers in our heads.
Chips. Or, you know, scan.
They're working on it right now.
Yeah.
I think that's crazy.
So when these people had voices in their head, maybe they were just there's some time travel involved. You know? I don't know. It's part of, I guess the older I get, it's a little frightening, but part of it's really cool too, you know, where we're going to be in 50 years.
Yeah.
But I'm at the age now where I'd like to be able to go out my front door in my old house on Main Street, take a left, and somehow make it 1920, and just walk all the way to the lake and cross the street and walk all the way back.
Yeah.
That would be kind of fun to do.
Yeah, very sweet.
I think the area probably changed so much since in 100 years. Just Main Street alone.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen some old pictures. Joyce has a couple.
Yeah. Just horses going down Main Street.
Yeah, that's the baffling thing to me.
Same
I can't
buildings,
imagine
though.
that.
Some of those buildings are the same.
Right.
Exact
I always look at the
buildings.
dates, you know. I know on North Main Street where the street turns,
Yeah.
the women, the Ladies Flower Commission, there was a natural spring there. And so farmers coming in from the north with horses would always water their horses there.
Really?
And the Women's Flower Commission kept flowers all planted there and whatnot. And then when we got cars, and they're wider and bigger, and people turning left turn lane, they did away with it. But there's still a natural spring, not far
That's
under.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like that, you know. And like Tavell Street was named after like these boys that were killed in this. One was killed in the Civil War, and one made it home. Johnson was for Senator Johnson. And at a city council meeting, there was an argument that when Senator Johnson died, they were going to name it all the way across Johnson Avenue. And some of these older guys are like, by God, you will not. The Tavell boys died in the war, and we're keeping that, you know. So it's kind of fun to look up the local history.
We our road was going to be out in the country. It was whoever was the first on the road. That's who they named it after. And literally, when they were naming our road, our family was on vacation, and so the next person that was the oldest was Rice, and so they named it Rice.
Rice Road.
So
You probably heard the story also about Grand Lake, that when St. Mary's was the county seat, there was a delegation from Celina that went to St. Mary's. They were going to go to Columbus and name the reservoir the Grand Reservoir. And they had a party the night before, and the guys from Mercer County over imbibed. And the next morning, all the guys from St. Mary's went to Columbus and named it Lake St. Mary's because the delegates from Mercer County did.
Wow.
And there's still bad blood.
Yeah, there is still bad.
And to us,
Sort
it's
of the
still
rivalry.
Grand Lake, and for a good reason.
Yeah.
That was what we were going to name it. And I've heard that from enough sources that I think it's true.
That's funny. I've never heard that one, actually.
I've never heard that one either.
I always tell people when I'm like in Athens, yeah, I'm by Grand Lake. No, Grand Lake St. Mary's. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
So we're gonna lop that end off of it, and it's just funny. That's kind of local competition.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard about 197 being a drunken Indian's the one who made it?
No.
That's who. There was like an old story that the reason why 197 is so twisty and everything is because a drunken Indian's the one who made that trail.
Oh, really?
first.
No, I never. I thought there was some farmer who wouldn't give
Yeah.
up his acreage because he said, and he had a little political influence. You'll go around my 40 acres, by God. I always wondered where that came from. Could be.
you can find out where
Drunken
people
Indian.
are stubborn that way. Out in Maria Stein, there's a lot of roads that aren't quite.
Yeah.
straight.
Those guys were not going to give up their acreage to the highway department, right? Probably the county at that time. Yeah.
So you're on the school board right now, right?
I am.
How's that? You've been doing that for quite a while.
I got elected in 15,
Okay.
and so I took office in January of 16. It's good. It can be kind of frustrating, but it's always interesting, to work with people and decide what policy. For example, the state cut us $570,000 funding for this year. So when I first saw it, I thought, well, we're going to have to adjust to that for 2021. No, we got that in April to cut $570,000 for this year. So we're like scrambling trying to save money. And what's frustrating to me, there's a rainy day fund in Columbus of over $2 billion. And I want to tell the legislature and the governor, it's raining.
Oh yeah.
It's a rainy day. It's raining. This whole COVID thing.
Do you think there's a disconnect between state and local at this point?
From an educational perspective, there is. From my view, there is. And whenever there is a crisis, and I did ask my state representative, so when we go through something like this, why is it always education that's the first cut? Let's find something else. And I'm not saying law enforcement, I'm not saying, but why is it always us that kind of gets, thrown to the
Social
curb?
Security or
Yeah.
something else?
It's frustrating.
What are the biggest issues you think right now in Celina School District?
It's always funding.
Is it?
And I was big on the levy committee. I'm of the
Yeah.
belief that we need new facilities. Not for me, not because Coldwater has it or Van Wert or St. Mary's, but because students will learn better in new facilities that aren't 70 years old. When the old high school was built in 1924, the field house, the new high school was built in 1962. Okay, so you do your math, it's less than 40 years. So the first graduating class from this high school is 1963. We do our math real quick. It's 57 years and counting. So for whatever reason, it seems to me that my grandfather's generation had a higher priority for education in buildings and structures and facilities than what we do today.
Do you think that levy would have passed if it wasn't for the
Yes.
COVID? You think so?
Yeah, the early votes we were leading.
What?
Yeah. From what I was looking at, I was going to actually vote for it, yes, but they cut it short. I wasn't able to make it in there and vote. But
Well, the governor looked right into the camera, too, and said the election will be on June 2nd. So people were very confused.
Yeah.
And I'm not angry because I know that this thing was scary. People were laid off. They're losing their 401ks. So, fear is a no vote. So I'm, like I said, I'm not angry at anybody. It was just very unfortunate that the way that the thing unfolded.
Yeah.
I'm just against the whole building new. I just think we should reuse. It's like look at all the Ivy Leagues. Their facilities are hundreds of years old. I think we should continue the tradition.
I think it'd be cool if we could, grow ivy up it and all that, air condition everything, and put in new facilities.
I just thought it was so much money. It was like almost too much for.
You know what though? To actually redo is more expensive.
I find that hard to believe.
I know. It really is. You talk to the architects and they say, well, it's like redoing an old house or dropping it and put up a new one. I have an old house and I like it, but an old school building is just difficult because you have to work around and you have to,
Yeah, but then you look at like the schools in Harlem and New York, and those are very old, very, very old. And it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of a waste. It's almost like you're indebting the next generation.
Oh, it is. And I get that. And I'm open enough that I'm open to any suggestions. And if we can use it, let's use it. But let's make it the best we can for the next generation.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, so that they learn and learn well. That's what I want.
Do you guys ever talk about the best way to, motivate teachers to be as good as they can be? Is that ever difficult?
Yeah, it's real difficult. And I would say this, that if the four of us went back into the classroom and we're going to give you guys crash courses on whatever your area would be, and let's assume that you're going to be successful, there would be 4 different teaching styles.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I don't think that there's one recipe that this, there are certain themes or whatnot, that bases that work. I think the first one is really caring about young people, and that comes through. They'll know if you care about them and if you love them and you want to help them, they're going to know that. But how you get that message across is going to be different for whoever's sitting there,
Do you think
like
it's
teaching? Go ahead, Frank.
Do you think it's too standardized now? Like there's too much like micromanaging by the state?
Well, it's really hard to try to measure things from a test.
Yeah, exactly.
The one test, the benchmark was how much you improved from the year before. And if you were up here from the year before, you're automatically going to get dinged because you can't go up any higher. And they tell you that. And it's kind of a joke among superintendents and school boards. So in the one category where we scored poorly was because we couldn't improve any higher in that category, which to me is just ridiculous.
And then does that affect like your funding?
It can. It hasn't yet, but absolutely. So for the amount of money that we get for a building project, let's say, local economics plays an important role. And they don't tell us what the formula is for that, but local economics, if the more poor the district, the more money you get from the state, which is good and bad. We'd like to have enough money that we can be self-sufficient, because when we are, then we have a little more local control.
You get more control on what kind of things, like what is built and things like that.
That feels like, to me, it's almost like the robber baron myth, where it's like taking from those who have a lot and giving it to those who don't.
But then the opposite of that is you'll have a school district in a very rich community.
Because it's property tax based, where it's just extravagant and they have all the money.
And the kid can't help where he's born.
And that's like, can you stop it? Like, I feel like you're really just going to shackle someone if you do that. If you're saying like, you cannot, everyone has to have an equal amount of funding for schooling, just because it's not like that.
You can't make it equal, but I think that there can be
a better
tilt than what it is right now. There was actually a court case about 30 years ago which said that current school funding in Ohio is discriminatory based on what we're discussing. So kids from Vinton County, which is down kind of by Athens County, the poorest county in the state, their schools are terrible. They have to get out the bucket brigade every time, and so we got a kid that's real bright, or they want to go into whatever. They don't have the facilities there for medicine. They want to be a doctor. But in another school district, they have state-of-the-art everything. Well, again, it's not that kid's fault. They don't control where they're born. But that was never implemented, that court case, because the legislature said, how do we do it?
I think they should do a voucher system where it's like, doesn't matter where you go, everyone gets their own voucher, and the voucher's worth, say, the state would cost the state $16,000 to go to school for a year. So you get a voucher that says you can go to the school and use your voucher at the public school, or you can go to a private school and have this deducted off of it, or you can be homeschooled and be paid for it. And then you can, it stimulates competition to where you can have districts actually, one person can go to a different district without not being able to play sports or something like that.
I think one of the problems with like the charter schools where they kind of do that is they're taking actually money away from the public schools and they're funding the charter schools with that, and kind of cherry picking kids out of the public schools to go there. And the problem I've got with that is it's like the Titanic hitting the iceberg, and we're only going to save the people in the first class. What about people in steerage? What about, we need to help them too. We got to lift them up.
Well, that's the constant struggle, I think, with any schooling is how much you let the top tier kids get extra help and excel them versus the middle and bottom, or what the balance of that is. Because anytime you spend more time with the kids on the bottom, you are taking that away from kids at the top.
And there's kids that just don't want to be there and don't want to do any of the work or want to actually succeed.
And that's why I think the career compacts are great.
Yeah.
Because now maybe we'll, ignite something in that young person that heretofore we hadn't. They may not like Shakespeare, but they'd be great at, whatever hands-on project it is.
that TriStar building, that's a nice
It's
building.
phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
That's a sweet. I wish I could get like a tour through that. And just look. Through
You
it.
can.
Can you?
Yeah, I mean, it's public. You can go through it. You should. That would be a great podcast for you guys.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Go through the TriStar.
Go get out there, and those guys, I'm sure they'd love to because they know how important it is to get out to the public too.
Yeah.
That would be a good one for you.
How was that funded?
That is, there are 9 schools that pay in, and then those schools all send their students there based on there's qualifications for them to get in there, but they all contribute. And since it's in the Celina School District, we're the fiscal agent, but really we just pretty much take the check and hand it to them. We have to be the receiver, but
Are you guys pushing the kids more that direction? Like go to those skill
it's
positions?
being encouraged.
Make them a little bit more encouraged.
I think it's
kind
a
of a
better
boost of-
system. I think our system
it's
is
a boost to local
outdated.
economy too,
Yeah.
potentially.
And I ran into a student that's older now, and they said, "Mr. So, why didn't you guys encourage that back when I was that?" I said, "There were none around.
Yeah.
Right.
You would have had to gone to Toledo." And I was actually told when I was an undergraduate that if you have a bright kid, you want to tell them to go to college. If they're ambitious and they like education, because there weren't any really career compact type of schools around.
Well, I think that is still the general thought, but it might go away. I think the sentiment towards college is kind of shifting a little bit.
Well, I think too many people
yeah.
have it. Too many people have a degree. It used to be reserved for like purely academia, where now it's like everyone's got it. You have to have a degree to get most jobs.
I think it's swinging the other way, actually. When I was my age group, well, like I said, I went to school in Columbus. You had to go to college. Now people are realizing that you don't have to go to college. It's more important going into a field that you enjoy doing and developing that, whatever that is.
And I would agree with you. I think anyone with a lot of ambition can pretty much do anything. Unless it's real corporate, you can get hired into about any position.
I think it's
if
a
you
bad
just go at
idea.
it.
It's we're creating like a surf society when we have so many kids indebted.
Well, right. And it's not supposed to be that way.
No, yeah, and it's subsidies.
Well, when they had the guaranteed student loan, as soon as
That's
they
right, yeah.
guaranteed it, all the tuitions
What college wouldn't charge as much? So you got a
because
surefire loan.
They're going to get paid back.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So I remember, when tuition and room and board were truly affordable. Now they're just out of sight. But you have the community colleges. It's way different than going on campus in Athens. But at least you can get an education. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to be, an engineer, you can go to the local branch.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a different thing, but it's a good thing.
I wouldn't trade my college experience for anything yet, but we'll see. I'll give you like 5 years, 10 years, and I'll give you a report back. But
Not to get too personal, but do you have a huge college debt?
no, I'm in a very fortunate position.
Good.
I got good help.
Yeah, and those students that couldn't afford to go to Bowling Green or Kent State or Ohio State or Ohio University, it's great that Wright State Lake campus is here.
Yeah. I went to Rhodes State College, and I have no debt. I paid it all off already, and I actually paid it in cash, but because I saved up, because my dad made me save up money to do that. But the community colleges were awesome. You still got a little vibe of like the big college, but not really.
It's different, but it's an education, and that's the important thing, And in my day down in Athens, education was just the whole gambit, It was, I remember a professor saying, "Don't let your classes get in the way of your education."
They wouldn't say that now.
Yeah. And I know what he meant, but you can't take that too literally either, But,
It's interesting. There's all sorts down there. There's people who are really getting the most out of their education, but there's a lot of kids who made it through all right without trying very hard.
yeah.
And not taking it very seriously. But, they still have great qualities, and they still picked up a lot of skills in communication and, personal
Social interaction.
Exactly, which is hyper valuable because there's a lot of people who just aren't good at it anymore.
There was a guy in 60 Minutes that had been a student at Berkeley, somewhere out west, UCLA, for like 44 years. And right before he'd get a degree, he'd switch majors. He had a ton of money, like family money, and he just enjoyed being a student. So he had like, I don't know, 2,200 hours college credit. And
I think if I had unlimited money, I'd probably do a similar thing. I love going to lectures and I took so many history classes. I probably could have minored in it.
Yeah, I like that too.
Storytelling.
Yeah,
it's like watching
history
a
and
movie.
psychology are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the hands-on stuff. That was me. I like taking those types of classes. And
I
now
feel like you like a bit of both, though.
Well, that's the pews
Yeah.
right here. That's putting the pews together.
exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, that's a great thing.
Thank you.
My youngest son, that's what he does. He loves woodworking.
Yeah.
When he was in high school, he took AP classes, but he said, do you care if I keep taking my woodworking classes while I'm a junior and senior? Not at all. That's what you love doing. That's what you should do, you know. And we're different. We're all different.
Yeah.
It's
said
like
you've
music.
been-
There's a guitar and a guitar. You know, that's good stuff, I think, you know.
Thank you.
So over quarantine here, you've been reading books and playing guitar, you said.
Yeah.
What kind of books are you into?
I read another one, a Civil War book, a Bruce Catton book from like the 50s that I'd never read. A couple of those, and they were really, really good.
You're pretty well renowned on the Civil War specifically, right?
That's my favorite, and I don't know why I kind of, you know, locked into that, but that's what I enjoy studying and reading. And
I got a question for you. Do you know about how they passed the Transatlantic Railroad during the Civil War? Have you read into that much?
not much. I know they did,
Yeah,
but I mean, I didn't read a whole lot about how they did.
because I've been trying to find more and more stuff about that, and there's like it's tough.
Well, I know Lincoln wanted certain things to go on, like the Capitol building, the building itself, construction, it was being all redone, and they insisted that it be stopped because the war was so expensive. And he said, no, it's going to continue. So that whole new look to the Capitol Dome was done during the Civil War. He wanted to make sure that the Republic continued as well we could, which is what I would suspect about the Transatlantic Railroad. You know, we're going to survive this war somehow. Let's keep building, you know.
Yeah, keep expanding, keep growing the country and stuff.
Because this war is going to be over someday.
Yeah.
You know? It's like the social war we've got right now. Someday it's going to be over. I don't know what
It'll be
it's gonna
something else.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so is that what kind of like drove you into like the history stuff? Like you just like the wars and the
I liked, you know, I liked studying all of that. I remember really kind of, you know, when Kennedy was assassinated, I was in the third grade. I remember very clearly, as most people will, important historical events, like you guys with 9/11 or whatever, you know, or my father's generation with Pearl Harbor. But that was a strong motivator. So was, like I said, the social unrest and the political unrest during the Vietnam War, even though I was pretty young. I kind of focused on and read a great deal about those kind of things, and that's kind of what got me going, I think.
Did you at the time, like, did you realize that like that's going to be history? Like, I'm actually living in that history time that where people actually come back and talk about it.
Somewhat.
And
I mean,
did
the Kennedy thing, it didn't take, and the same thing with the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and all that was going on then. Even though I was like 14 years old, I knew that this was very important.
Yeah.
You know, and we wait later to try to sort it all out and analyze. But at the time, you couldn't help but know. It was like seeing Neil Armstrong jump onto the surface.
Oh wow.
This is big stuff.
And that's why it's like I enjoyed listening to you as a history teacher, is because you lived through a lot of those moments in time. I feel like a lot of that's lost because it's just a lot of young.
Right. Well, people
You can't
just go
fight
to
it
this.
either,
If it's
yeah.
not on Wiki, forget it.
Exactly. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, and that's why that's where we're losing some stuff there. My wife and I went to the Daily Plaza Book School Depository Museum, which is where Oswald was when he fired the
Okay.
shot.
Yeah. Did you really? That's awesome.
And then we had lunch afterwards down the street at a famous barbecue place. You know, and I said to this little waitress, I said, you know, being so close to where Kennedy was shot, have you been there? Do you get into that much? She goes, I don't know history and stuff. I don't know any of that. And I thought, you're a block or two away.
Yeah. One of the
And
craziest
they have an
things
X, you know, painted on the road in Elm Street where the car was when he was shot, with just, you know, and we're losing that when we ignore it, you know.
Do you think it lines up from the window to where the X is?
I do.
All right.
I do. Yeah. It took me a while to come to that conclusion, but yeah, I do.
I love all the theories and conspiracy theories and all that. Anything like that. It's just exciting.
I'm actually listening to a podcast. It's called "Son of a Hitman," and it's Woody Harrelson's what's the guy who played
That
off
actor?
of the
Yeah,
actor.
that's
His dad
Buddy.
was a hitman. Like it was supposedly a hitman. Like Charles.
I thought his dad
Harrison?
was Buddy Harrelson.
Harrison, yeah.
Yeah, that
Charles
was a
Harrison.
baseball player. You got to check that.
Maybe I do.
I've heard that, Jacob.
Yeah, like Charles Harrison was his dad, and his Woody Harrelson tried to because apparently he got locked away for a long time for killing a judge.
Really?
Wood, the federal judge would or something like that.
There he is.
But maybe
Is his angle that there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy?
Yeah. It was sort of like he was sort of connected in the killing of Kennedy, and also like in these.
So you're
pretty
talking about a
big
different
hitmen.
one. I think this is the one you're talking about, Jacob.
It's Charles Harrison.
You're talking about the actor's father.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so we're thinking of
who
it.
did
I thought
say?
the actor's father honestly was a baseball player for the Cleveland Indians. Look up Buddy. This has got to be interesting for people on the podcast. Say, why don't they do that on their own time?
They're along
He's
for
a
the ride at this
baseball.
point.
He's a baseball player.
Now, I thought Buddy
Buddy
was Woody's father, but
I guess it's Charles.
okay.
Because Woody.
Yeah, you guys need to listen to that pod. That's
I'll
a
have
pretty
to
good
check it out.
podcast.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating on what this guy's supposedly have done, but everyone believes he was like a stone cold killer.
Bill, do you get into
Hitman.
that at all?
What's that?
Conspiracy theories or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that it, I mean, I do believe Oswald was the trigger guy, but it
I think he
went
was
further than that.
He was set up. I think it was someone else.
Further than that.
Yeah. There's so many different many different theories around that whole deal.
The magic bullet that went down and came back up.
You know, Bob Dylan has a new song called Murder a Foul. Have you heard it?
I've not heard it yet, but I did hear you release that album.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's about the Kennedy assassination, and it's a 17-minute long song,
17 minutes?
but it's getting tons of airtime.
I'm gonna have to listen to it.
I am too.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, he's kind of scratchy now, but it's still vintage Bob Dylan. Get a chance to check it out.
How old were you on the Kennedy?
8.
You were 8? Did you like remember like your sort of like emotions of what was going on and stuff?
I ran home wanting to tell my mom because for somehow in my mind I knew she didn't know about it, but of course she did. You know, and I lived in Wapakoneta at the time, and going from Centennial School walking home, we had to go by St. Joe, which was the parochial school, the Catholic school, and the church bells tolling. You know, he was the first Catholic president. And so it hit the Catholic community very hard when he was killed. So I'll never forget going past St. Joe on my way home when, you know, Kennedy died. And I had to stay in at recess because I'd been bad that day. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And the custodian came in, and he had a transistor radio, and he was telling my teacher, Mrs. Crumrine, something. And I could see the look on her face, something was badly wrong. And I said, what's going on? And he said, the president's been shot. And I said, is he dead? He goes, no, but he was shot in the head with a high-powered rifle. And I remember even thinking as an 8-year-old, he's done.
Yeah.
And I asked the teacher if I could go out and tell other students at recess. And she says, yeah, go. She wanted to go to the teacher's lounge, find out what was going on. Yeah. And there was a little division back then because of Catholic versus Protestant.
Okay.
There really was, yeah.
Really?
That's interesting. Do you think that plays any role now? Like, do the Catholic population in Celina have any local like government pull?
You know, there's an argument from friends of mine that they tend to vote for the Catholic candidate. I don't know that that's true. But they say that, you know, the politics south of 29 is a little bit different than the politics north of 29. I don't know that.
I think it just creates some more traditional values, like conservative values.
Yeah, good. Like the abortion issue, let's be
Exactly.
honest.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I first moved to Mercer County, it was every office holder was a Democrat. Now, moderate or conservative Democrats, but Democrats. And I think it was like the 2 R's that changed, and that was Ronald Reagan and the right to life. And it was kind of a delay, you know, because the court case was in 1973, and it took 15 years really before it was locally manifested at the polls, you know.
It's always interesting to me that certain issues like that become so political. Like to me, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Like it's like to me separate from that. I get it's a legal issue in a way, but it's like to me it's more of a moral issue. And if that's what you're basing, if you're a Republican because you think babies shouldn't be aborted, that's kind of a weird reason to be a Republican.
A lot of people tend to focus on 1 or 2 issues, though. I mean, if you think about the Second Amendment, you know, or you think about what's going on now with the free speech, with the shooting of Mr. Floyd, or I'm not the shooting, but the death of George Floyd, you know, about where are my rights and how are they actually carried out in our society today. And, you know, I told my middle son, who's a police officer, and and he's a good one. And I told him, though, I said, I've never seen a black officer kneel on a white man's neck for 8 minutes. Or two black, a father-son chase a white young man through a community, a suburb with shotguns and shoot him. There are certain things that do seem out of kilter in our country, to me.
But didn't they have like dogs? Didn't they have like sick dogs on the rioters during the civil rights movement?
Oh, yeah, but see, that was still white on black. I mean,
Yeah.
I
You're saying the other way around. Yeah.
I never really saw the opposite of that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we've kind of come to, I don't want to say the word expect it, but maybe accept it, where we wouldn't if the obverse was true,
I don't know about that. To me, if that video comes out and it's a white cop on a white man, I don't think people get fired up at all.
That's what.
Maybe it doesn't happen.
How about
it didn't happen, but
it does happen.
It's
how about an African American cop on a white man?
that'd be a weird situation.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
There's plenty. I mean,
But
like you
I
can look
still-
at plenty of images in Hong Kong of the Chinese on doing the same thing on the Hong Kong.
And people are fired up
protesters.
about that too.
Yeah.
Of course, Hong Kong is, but even Americans. I mean, when that was happening before coronavirus and afterwards, it's something you and I both take a lot of pride in, Frank. We think that, anytime there's a oppressive,
authoritarian yeah.
thing on people that to try to rise up, I think is pretty cool.
So wait, now apply that again to Corona. How is that?
I just mean the Hong Kong protest kind of took a dip because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
Well, now they're passing the extradition. They want to be able to extradite to mainland China.
Really?
So yeah, so now China will be able to, anyone who's gets convicted in Hong Kong can be extradited to China. And I think China has a 99.5% conviction rate.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so it's like if you're convicted of something in China, you're.
So are you guys of the, not to switch gears, but it was just mentioned enough here by Hank that the whole coronavirus, do you think it's legitimate?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it used to be, and I think it was because of how viruses work. It's legitimate in where it originated, but viruses, how a virus evolves, it does not want to kill its host or maim them because it wants to live. Right when it kills the host, it's going to die. So right when the virus crossed the barrier from China to everywhere else, it was already pretty weakened. And by the time it's here, now a lot of the fear is creating almost like a placebo. It's just overstimulation of it. I think it's just because if you look at all of the deaths in the last 2 months, there's pneumonia deaths dropped. There's almost zero pneumonia deaths anymore. There's zero flu deaths anymore. I think it's just really blown out of proportion.
Call them COVID deaths now. But I don't know. I think they may have overreacted. But that's coming from living here where it didn't really touch.
Yeah.
Christian is home from San Francisco, and he said it's really bad there. And people there are taking it very seriously because people are dying. Hospitals are getting full, and it's a huge issue. And that's real.
Well, back in March or April when it was full tilt in New York City and Cuomo was on every day, and they showed bodies stacked in the hallways of the hospitals in New York City, and they were saying they were losing 1,000 a day. I believe that. Now, I don't know. I heard that the coronavirus, it does become a respiratory thing. So they probably do actually die of pneumonia, but I think that their system is weakened from the virus. That's
yeah,
good. Yeah.
and the ventilator thing was completely wrong because if you're on a ventilator long enough, you will die. Like that's just how it works being on a ventilator. And so they threw everyone on these ventilators, and the ventilators probably killed most of the people because eventually the ventilator works how it is. It pressurizes your lungs, and so eventually over time it pops all the air sacs in your lungs. So it's just like there's just too many things that are just fishy with the whole thing. It's just at the time, like you had the economic. There was the shadow banks last year in September they were declaring they needed money and they needed bailed out, and then I don't know. The stimulus is a little weird too.
It is weird, and so is people getting unemployment more than what they were.
Exactly.
At work. There's a lot of crazy things.
That stuff should not have happened. That's a weird one.
Yeah.
Because now people definitely, I mean, they're pretty much back now, at least here. But that's like a weird and
Why go back?
Exactly.
I'm getting more money watching TV.
Man.
But I did hear one economist, now again, this is television, I forget which network, but he said, we do have now a giant reset, and that's good for our society. I mean, from a social, political, economic perspective, because we were going downhill too fast anyway. We needed an economic adjustment, not maybe this way, but it's a giant reset for our country. So we got to try to make a negative a positive, I think.
Oh, I think that's how most people are going to try to look at it. I would hope so. But to me, I don't think we've really felt the worst of it yet. At least personally, I haven't. My life is still awesome. So
You guys are exempt. You know, pretty much you are. You guys can go into the bars and be elbow to elbow, and you're going to be fine.
Exactly.
But just, you know.
But we feel the economic side of it.
Oh,
I mean, a
absolutely.
lot of my friends weren't able to go to work. They work in the ecotourism industry, and all that's dead for the summer.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
they came
Yeah,
home.
you don't want people starving to death either. It doesn't make any sense to,
Or going and beating their wife and kids because they
Right.
have nothing else to
Frustrated,
do.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's, I think
frustrating.
the cure is worse than the disease.
And I know how, you know, the media works, again, whether it's the old print media or whether it's electronic media. You know, you blow on the embers to keep it hot. And you go back to War of the Worlds, and again, fear sells. And
The
all they
people
had to do
thought
was
that
change
was
the station.
real.
Yeah,
They thought that was
they're
real.
jumping out of buildings.
Yeah.
I think it's very dangerous because, for example, our community that didn't get hit hard by the coronavirus, if something actually does happen, they're going to be numb to it.
The
and
boy who
not do
cried wolf.
anything. Yeah, and it's because
Yeah.
they tried to milk it a little too hard. I
Yeah,
think.
but again, I think it's real. We got to be careful, and the smarter we are about it, the healthier we're going to be as a country.
Yeah.
You know,
And of course, we all don't want people to die unjustly.
right?
I mean, that's
And I mean, if you do look at the numbers, I don't know why John Hopkins would lie, but if it's 120,000 people, we lost 55,000 in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That took 10 years. You know, we've doubled that in 3-4 months. You know, so if we look at those numbers as being accurate, that's frightening.
And I'm not saying it's like the whole thing is like the virus itself is a hoax, like, because it's mainly just it's a more viral version of the flu. And it's like that's the reason why it's taking down a lot of the elderly, just because they're always been more susceptible to it.
I think it's just a higher contagious flu that's got a deadlier element to it, you know.
yeah, it's interesting, and it's again funny to me that became so political.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. It's 2020.
Yeah, and it's
Well, 2016 was ugly, though, too. I mean, that was just a very ugly election.
Yeah.
it changed the game a little bit.
All right, you want to take a break?
Yeah, I think we can take a break.
Perfect. We're back.
Oh boy, we are back. I had a question. I just lost it right when he said we're back.
I love that when you're in class and you'd pick someone up to raise their hand. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Or what's worse is when I'm asking the question and halfway through the question, I forget what I was asking. That's pretty bad. I'll remember later. Yeah, that's bad too.
What did you enjoy more about teaching? Like, what did you enjoy the most?
I loved critical thinking exchanges between teacher and student, and between student and student. You know, about a topic that, and this is where the social studies animal's way different than like math or science, where the equation always balanced. In social studies and social sciences, it does not. You know, so I will pose a question that may not have a definite answer.
Not black or white.
Right. And so that drives the people that are kind of oriented toward the sciences a little crazy because they want to be able to have
This is the answer.
Yeah.
We're trained that it's either A, B, or C, and you got to pick one.
And sometimes it's not, you know, it's
Most of the time it's not, I feel like. The world's gray.
if you look at what we're going through like right now, someday they'll be looking at this and there'll be a multiple choice answer to what was happening in 2020.
Boy, yeah. That's weird to think.
It goes way deeper than that,
Yeah.
you know, it goes way farther than that.
It will be like that, though.
Uh-huh. And so I always liked that interaction about controversial subjects in history. I think that was always fun, you know.
What do you think the best way to get students like in the mindset where they're willing to do that kind of thing? Because I think every teacher strives for a little bit of give and take, or like just student participation is not always easy to rally like the whole class. I think maybe a couple kids.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the problem. You know, some kids, you know, maybe the brightest student in the class is an introvert, and you just want to try to sometime strike the chord that they respond to. And you know, you can't always do it, but you I always try to make the effort. Calling the quiet kid and say, "Do you have anything to offer here?" No. Okay.
I feel like a lot of teachers might target the quiet kid in that sense.
Yeah, and you don't want to take them out of their comfort zone, but at the same time, I would know they had a lot to offer. So you try to get something that would interest them, and it's difficult.
Oh yeah, you're kind of like when you go see like a rock show. It's like you're trying to get everyone to dance. You know what I mean? Like that's really how it is, especially in lecture heavy things.
Yeah.
You were trying to hold everyone's attention. And I never had you, so I can't say whether or not you were that good, but I imagine you were.
You were good. You were a very good teacher.
Well, but you can't always. I mean, there's always going to be those people staring out the window.
Yeah, exactly. They're just not interested.
It's snowing. I said, well, okay, and that's the same thing with you don't click with every student, just like we don't socially with everybody. I made an effort to try to be kind to everyone, but some you get along with better than others. That's just human nature. That's the way it is.
And I think one thing that's really interesting as far as like high school politics or the way like teachers interact with students is the people you get along with are a lot of times like popular kids just because they're more charismatic. And I think it leads a lot of teachers to picking favorites, even if they're not trying to.
Right.
Do you guys think about that consciously, like as a teaching group?
Yeah, and people would ask me, students would ask me, does that happen? And I would say of myself, never consciously. Who knows the subconscious? But you probably do want to go to the kid that will respond or that might know the answer.
Yeah.
Let's get things going here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And sometimes, that becomes a crutch. Or I'd see the kid on the track, or I'd have them in some extracurricular. So you
build a
would
relationship
feel more,
with them.
Yeah, you feel more friendly toward them or whatnot. But I'd fight that and try to get everybody going, and it was difficult sometimes.
I bet it is difficult too, because like I remember, like I'm not raising my hand at all, but they still pick you. I'm like, I didn't raise my hand because I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And that probably could be difficult
Right,
too.
or I just don't want to talk. I'm not comfortable in talking, and I understand that.
What was the worst student you had? Did you have anyone that was just like, I can't do
the
this?
best. We want names.
Phone numbers, addresses, everything.
So the one that always bothered me the most, or the ones, were not the ones that were openly belligerent, but the ones that were just so apathetic that they did nothing. To me, they were the most dangerous. Not because they were necessarily going to hurt someone or anything like that, but they did absolutely nothing. The kid in study hall that would draw race cars all day. Okay, at least he's got an interest in race cars. But the kid that would sleep every single day and never do anything, to me, that's the scariest.
There's a lot of truth to that. I think so.
You want people, even sometimes the real obnoxious ones, at least they had something to offer.
Exactly.
You have to say, tone it down, edit what you're saying. But the ones that would never offer anything, that would challenge me the most. Yeah.
Oh, it makes you think. What are they doing? Why are they like this?
Why can't I reach this kid? Right.
Yeah, I always do. Do you think that the schooling today should be this long? Like, because I always think like now that some of the things that they are teaching us, like I haven't used a lot of it at all in high school. And do you think it should be all 12 years of schooling, or should it be a little longer or shorter?
To be honest, I think it's pretty close the way that it is. I think at about 18, a kid should be thinking about his future, her future, what they're going to do. I do think that, when we promote a kid to third grade at age 8, that's probably kind of a miss, because some kids should be at the 5th grade in math and at the 2nd grade in reading and at the 6th grade in music. And, but we tend to just pass them on to, at a certain age, when their skills in different academic or extracurricular even subjects are way different. They're very proficient. Like I said, in math, they should be in 6th level math in the 3rd grade.
Did it used to be like that? Like before No Child Left Behind and that?
No, but I think that when a teacher had more freedom in their own classroom to recognize that, they could challenge that kid with, read this book.
Okay.
Now not so much, because you got to take this test in 4 months to validate me and you and to make sure that our school district is complying with, So that's one of the problems I've got with the way that it's done today. And I get it. They want to make sure that teachers are held accountable for what they're supposed to be teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Understand
that's
that.
a tough thing to do, and because to me it's obvious that testing isn't the best way to do it. Or there's a lot of issues with testing to prove that a teacher's doing well, and there's a lot of things. But like, you can't really like interview the students because they have biases too if they don't like that teacher, even if they're doing a good job or whatever it is. And like, do you think there's a better way? Like, do you have any ideas on how we could get, I guess, the best reviews on these teachers? Because we had good teachers, and I've had good teachers in college and high school, and I've had bad ones. And the teachers that teach the bad classes, you don't learn anything from them.
Right. I think the secret, and I don't know how to do it, but attract the best into the profession to start with.
Competition.
Yeah, whether it's in high school or elementary school or college, get the best and the brightest that want to teach, that enjoy it and have a passion for it, rather than this is an easy major, or whatever.
But that's a hard filter to have.
Absolutely it is.
I don't really know how the teachers union and stuff like that works, but I know there's teachers that might hang around a little longer just because maybe they lost their fire or something after a while, and it's like you can't really reprimand them because they're in.
Right.
So like, do you have any opinions on that? Or
I do. I think that you're right. I think that a lot of teachers, like toward the end of my career, there were times, well, when I was a young teacher, I'd walk around the front of the classroom. And I noticed like my last 5 or 6 years, I had a stool in front of the classroom that I sat on and taught from there. I would probably be more effective if I had the energy to keep going, And it is kind of a young person's game in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think your ambition to like come into every day, like because it is a lot to teach those kids every single day. You're getting there early, you're staying late grading papers. It's a kind of a ruthless job, but yeah, I can understand if a teacher
in my field though, the older I got, the more I had up here to draw from. And like in Civil War history, kids would say, well, just tell us some stuff that's not in the book. And you could see that a lot of them really liked that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They like hearing the stories.
I think anyone appreciates
tell us,
that.
right.
I think that's just bred into us. Like, that's how we pass down most of our knowledge was spoken.
Especially because I feel like kids are a little angsty towards like written book. They don't like the state testing either. They're not there they don't like test at all. They just, if you're going to be entertaining, especially for something like history, which generally is an entertaining thing, or at least storytelling, they watch movies or whatever it is, you want to get a little, you want to be as specific as you can while still holding people's attention. And
history's a story. I mean, that's what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Where government, not so much. Government's like, there's 3 branches. And the first 10 amendments, and it's a little
bit more
regimented.
So is history, like the actual history class, is that your favorite to teach, or was it like the government, or did you do any like psychology or?
At one time I did teach psych and I taught Soc, but my favorite course to teach was Civil War history.
Civil War history.
I just enjoyed it, because I started pre-Civil War and went all the way through Reconstruction, and it's just an exciting, interesting chapter in American history. Very tragic, of course, but it's very interesting.
I think the best thing about that class was the project. How everyone found someone that served in the Civil War.
Yeah, and you had to go look them up.
We had to do the graphite.
Yep. Okay.
The grave rubbings.
Yeah.
I got a question for you about the Civil War. So there's a debate that I have personally because of like the Constitution saying that states could succeed. I realized that they had to step in likely because of slavery specifically, just because it was so unjust. But and that's why the states wouldn't succeed anyways, if I'm not mistaken. But in some ways, it seems like they should have maybe been allowed to. Because the federal government shouldn't have had that much control.
Well, what's interesting about that is, so secession, which Northerners consider to be treason, is basically what we did from England.
Exactly.
We seceded from England.
And it was written in that we could.
Right. But where Lincoln said it was illegal to secede, he allowed West Virginia to secede from Virginia during the middle of the Civil War because Western Virginia was loyal to the North.
Right.
So secession's illegal unless it's benefiting us.
Well, it's like
it was benefiting them to have the whole team there,
right?
To be able to.
So politics doesn't change in that regard. And I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation, where Lincoln freed the slaves, honestly, he didn't free anybody. Because he said in the border states, Kentucky, Maryland, Missouri, where they were neither north nor south. He didn't free any slaves where there were Union troops there, and he could have. He said, in the rebelling states, they will be free. Well, no slave master is going to say, well, that foreign president freed you. Just go ahead.
Yeah.
You know. So the whole Juneteenth, that's when the news got to Texas that they were actually free. And the other reason he did it, he wanted to keep England out of the war because England was thinking about siding with the South over the cotton issue. And they were ahead of us socially, women's rights, children's rights. Slavery was gone years and years earlier. And he knew if he freed the slaves, England would say, we cannot ally ourselves with a slave nation, the South. So it kept them out of the war. So it was very political.
That was the original reason why it started, because taxes, they were out, wasn't the South,
well, cotton had to go from, they'd have to go from a port in, let's say, Charleston to New York and pay a duty before it was shipped to England. And they're going, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, we want to just take out the middleman.
But doesn't that create like it's almost like, I feel like the Civil War, they're teaching it a little extremely like biased, because they sell it as this idea that it was just all because of the slaves. You know, the South wanted slavery because they're being greedy, and the North was all forgiving and like this golden apple and like saving these guys. I
think slavery was the emotional issue, though. It really was. That's the one that got everybody fired up, like the abolitionists. It was kind of the abortion issue today for a lot of people.
Okay.
I mean, there's no middle ground. Bam, white hot. And so that was kind of the emotional spark. And the Southerners were saying, hold on a second. We do own these people. They are our property. But in the North, you have 7-year-old girls working in the textile industry and 7-year-old boys working in the coal mines. So don't be teaching us ethics and morality, actually preaching us, because there's very little difference between what's going on down here and what's going on up there. Well, don't tell that to a Northerner. And there is a difference. So it became geographical in that regard.
Absolutely. I don't know. For me, it was just a time where the federal government really took a lot of power.
Well, it's when they enacted the greenbacks too, and they started deficit spending. They started taking loans from England, and that was when
had to fund the war.
Exactly.
So it's the whole thing changed the scope of America, and it could have been very different today.
But I don't know. I'm kind of a Lincoln fan. I don't know what he could have done differently. He didn't think that they were going to secede, and he didn't think there was going to be a war. He thought he could diplomatically talk through this thing, and there were passions running too hot on both sides. And 620,000 dead Americans later, and smoking cities in the South, it was over. And I mean, it was ruthless.
Yeah, it's no joke.
I read that at the beginning of World War II, when England was fighting against Nazi Germany by themselves, a lot of British were angry at Americans for not entering. They thought we were all pacifists. Churchill was a real historian, and especially of the American Civil War. And he said, they're not pacifists. They killed 600 of themselves just 80 years ago. When they come in, look out, Hitler. And sure enough.
Yeah.
He said that he slept very soundly the night of December 7th, 1941.
Didn't Churchill kind of push, he did some stuff to kind of force the U.S. to bring it, to come in?
Well, the whole Lend-Lease program and all that. Yeah, they were working stuff out that should have taken legislative action that they were just doing back and forth. But the Japanese hurried the process along.
Yeah. Because I've heard that his memoirs, Churchill's memoirs, are he talks a lot about how he wanted the U.S. to come in, and he tried to do as much as he could.
They were just barely hanging on.
Yeah.
Another close call.
A lot of what ifs of history, It's just like we all have a lot of what ifs in our own personal lives.
Exactly.
So, have you heard the saying, history is written by the winners? Do you think there's a lot of just history that we have no idea about just because the winners just erased it all?
That and also as time goes on, we want to be kind of politically correct as to not offend people. So I remember reading in one of the American history books that I used to teach from, it was Reconstruction and in the South, how bad things were with the Ku Klux Klan and some of those organizations, a lot of secret organizations. And then they went, the Gilded Age. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to spend much time in our history book talking about that because it was a black, chapter in American history. It was dark. It was no fun. So rather than spend much time on it, we went straight to Andrew Carnegie and
railroad type.
Right.
Well, it's like I look back at like when the Europeans enslaved the Slavs. Like I read about that, and holy cow, it's gruesome. Like they would, every slave that was a male, they castrated every single one so they could not breed or have no emotion at all. And then they worked them to death.
Right.
Do you think if we did have that kind of stuff in our history book, do you think we would have learned from these mistakes that we have done and not have been sort of in this sort of situation that we are in now?
I don't know that we wouldn't be in it, but I think it's a mistake to not learn from it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They used to have these German students would come to Celina High School on holiday, and they'd all come in my classroom. There'd be like 15 of them. And some of them spoke English very well, and I asked this one young man, do you go to the camps? I said, I'm not trying to be offensive or too personal, but do you guys ever go to Auschwitz or Treblinka? And they said, oh, yeah. And I thought, that's smart. That's good of them to not reject what happened or ignore it, but to actually study it and learn from it.
Exactly.
I think it still might be sort of a similar thing. My dad said he went to Germany and they paint over all the swastikas, like on the planes. They'll go through like a Air and Space Museum or a plane museum or a World War II museum, and they paint over like that side of things.
I know that the swastika was actually illegal in Germany for a long time.
It's illegal to deny the Holocaust still in Germany. You're sent to prison.
I don't know you should be sent to prison, but I think that it would be crazy to deny it.
Yeah. But it's just weird that there's a law against that.
I put a swastika on the board, and this student, Kai Vogel, he said, oh, please don't do that. Please don't do that, Mr. Sell. I said, why? He goes, it's so illegal. I said, it's not illegal here.
Yeah.
It's maybe improper, but it's not illegal. I mean, and so I think to study it is one thing, to glorify it is something.
Right, absolutely.
It's like the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I had one in my classroom. But the kid that went into the black church, but I also had a Marine Corps flag, and I had an Irish flag, and I had 6 American flags, but I taught Civil War history. But the kid that went into the Charleston black church and killed 9 black people, African Americans, while they're at prayer study, and he had all the Confederate stuff on. That's what took it over.
Which is just back. It's, I don't know.
It's changing the symbol.
Yeah.
The same thing during the Black Lives Matter protests in Celina. I think some kids rolled up with like Confederate flags and things like that.
Yeah, they did.
And tried to like start a little scuffle, I guess, but nothing really happened about the whole deal. But even that, it's a weird thing to tout in that, like, who is still thinking that racism is
Gone?
No, just like all right.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, like that's, if you bring a Confederate flag to the Black Lives, there's only one correlation that I can see there.
I was coaching in a track meet years ago, and we had the junior varsity track meet in Wapak. So these are mostly sophomores, they're not varsity. So it's the JV, WBL. And I'm over there, and the coach in Wapak said, would you run the long jump? Sure, I'll do it. So there's kids from Elida and Defiance and Shawnee and Bath and Celina, all the WBL schools. And this white pickup truck kept going by the Wapakoneta High School football field, and in the back they had a Confederate flag, kid holding it, and they had that horn playing Dixie. Excuse me. So these African-American young men were around me, and they were talking. They said, ask him, he'll know. And I thought they were talking about where the foul line was for the long jump, because there were 2 white lines. I said, you guys can ask me, what's the question? And here it went again. And this African-American kid from Elida, and there was like 4 of them standing there from different schools. Hey, coach, are they doing that for our benefit? And I said, sadly, yes. And you have my apologies. I said, you know what? It didn't register with me like it did you guys. And I said, I apologize for them, but you're right. That's what they're doing. Okay. And the one told the other, I told you that's why they were doing it. That's what they.
So like, how do you think we should sort of fix this to not? I mean, because it is wrong to be racist. It's absolutely terrible, but it is still their freedom to express who they are. How do we? I mean, how do you think we should fix without taking away freedoms of what people think? And not being racist and not being...
It's really hard to enlighten someone who doesn't want to be enlightened. You know, it's hard to have someone read a book that doesn't want to read a book.
Right.
Or to be educated. And that's what it's going to take, you know, to somehow be in a situation where you understand someone of a different ethnicity or a different color or even nationality, that they're not evil or
My
wrong.
biggest, the thing with the racism to me is like it's completely up into the interpretation of whoever's saying it. It's like everyone's got their own different, there's not a fine line.
Well, I think, though, that in here there are a lot of people that still feel that their race is better than the other race.
Yeah. Well, to me, like when I learned what racism was, it's like you think you're superior to all other races, not only one, you're all other of them. And like this whole Black Lives Matter to me, it just seems like that's reverse racism. Like it's just pushing to be the black supremacist now.
Well, to me, I think it's okay to say Black Lives Matter. But that's not saying that white lives don't matter. Or that's not saying brown lives or any other color lives don't matter. It's okay to say that. I remember reading about, we're talking about World War II when we were turned off. The Japanese were so racist, they thought that their race was superior over every other race, which actually started their imperialism and taking all the territory because they deserved it, you know.
They're still very homogenous. They don't in China's even worse. China, they have imprisoned 2 million Uyghurs, Muslims, just because of their practice a different religion. They want them to.
Think how many Native Americans we put on reservations because we just kept pushing west, and what ended up being the least agricultural areas of the country was where they were going to inhabit, whether they wanted to or not. You know, it's like, well, this is our land.
Do you know the natives had slaves? Native Americans had slaves far after the Civil War. They were allowed to have slaves still.
Really?
I don't know about that one, Frank. I don't know about that. If they did, it had to be a very small percentage.
The Comanches, I believe. Comanches.
Comanches.
Well,
that's an interesting.
Yeah. I know that some of the.
Well, they're like they're their own nation in a way, right?
So we're going to give them tobacco sales and casinos to pay them back, which is very I mean,
it's cheesy. A lot of those guys have it bad in bad areas. They didn't get the good end of the stick.
No.
One thing you said there was what we did to the Native Americans. For me, I always kind of try to fight against that because I don't think it was we. It was they, you know. I wasn't there. None of my family was here. Like
I know. I guess, and I have to be careful in saying those kind of things, but you have to realize that white American males have dominated the American political system for 200 plus years.
But is it only white though? It's like because I'm mostly English, so I've like that's categorized generalizing, and just like how it's saying blacks, there's dozens of varieties of blacks. Well, same with this is there's always whites. Like, is it truly that the whites dominated, or maybe it was
and still do
or maybe it was
look at
Germanic.
the United States Senate.
Yeah,
I mean, well, I don't care what your background as far as nationality goes. Just the fact that skin color in the United States has been dominated. I mean, I should say it that way. White Americans have dominated the political landscape.
But they're the majority, so you would expect them to, too.
Yeah. I mean, but at the same time, if African Americans constitute, 12 to 15%, how many presidents should be have
Well, I can
African American?
take that same argument. 90% of all media owners are Jews. So they only make up 3% of the population. How is that fair? They're their own race to me.
They're their own religion.
The Ashkenazi Jews, you cannot breed into the Ashkenazi Jews. You can only be born into them. To me, that's a race.
But I don't think that you aren't limited from buying a network because of your last name or your ethnicity or your religion. Correct?
I don't know. I mean, I think the argument always comes down to like how you see race. And I think it's a weird thing about the whole Black Lives Matter movement now because of the police brutality. To me, they limited themselves by calling it a strike against the black people. And I get that cops have a history of being inherently racist to black people, but to me, it's an injustice to all people. And by I'm not going to go around saying all lives matter and all that shit, but it's like, why couldn't we be in this together? We could have been and we are, but they just couldn't say it that way. Because it's like I get that they're proud of their race. They're proud of their race, though. Like, we're all Americans. Like, we got to fix this.
I had a real good friend at Ohio University who was an African-American young man from Cleveland, and he told me one time, with real sincerity, there are things you are not going to understand because you're not African-American.
And that could be true, definitely.
And he said, growing up where I grew up and you growing up where you grew up, we're so many miles apart. I will always be your friend, but there are certain things that you're not going to get. And I think he's probably right.
But there's certain things the other way around too.
Oh, sure.
And
so it's just like that's to me is
but
inherently.
To me, it's like you just don't want to make it a race issue. It just fires up both sides. Like it's a people issue. We're people. We're all and the same thing. Kind of Frank's getting at. I think it's like sure all white people. The government's majority ran by white people, but we're not. We're not just white people. Like we are white, of course, and they're black, and you can see that. But he's Italian, French. Jacob's, we're all from different spectrums. You come from the city. We all have this different, very diverse. Even though we're all white. Sometimes one of my friends always comments whenever we post about the podcast. Oh, another podcast by 3 white guys. I'm like, we're diverse white guys. Like,
But we think. I mean, we think differently too.
We're different.
And just
people.
the way we are different people. That's why another thing about like teaching like diversity and stuff. Like it's always race and
it's always
this
like
stuff. Like everyone's diverse. Like everyone's different people. So why are we teaching just diversity as just?
But one point I think that they make that is fair is that especially let's go back to 1960 or 1950, if you're applying for a job in Columbus and you're Italian or you're Irish or you're Bulgarian, whatever you are, people aren't going to probably ask you that on the application. They might see the last name and say, oh, it sounds like he's Italian or it sounds like, he's Slovak or something. But since you're Caucasian, it didn't matter. Where an African-American applicant wouldn't even get a chance to fill out the application.
Maybe so.
I just find that weird because it's like
I hope that doesn't happen anymore.
I mean, but 1950, 1960. And this black friend also in college says, hey, Bill, how many African Americans did you see on the Andy Griffith show? None. How about it was very subtle discrimination, but it was there. You just didn't see a certain segment of our population on television. They weren't the news anchors. They weren't the weather ladies. They weren't in the commercials. They weren't on any of the sitcoms. That's just the way America was back then.
To me, it's just weird because it's like they make it seem like blacks have always been oppressed, and it's like blacks, like in the 20s and 30s, 100% of all the construction workers were black, and they were really good at it. They were very industrious, and that was the majority of the South. And then they started coming up into the North and outbidding a lot of the government contracts for the construction jobs, and then they created the minimum wage law. So everyone has to have a fair pay, and then they integrated everyone into the cities in the 60s.
But I would say that not 100% in the 20s and 30s.
It wasn't until the 30s that in the first white construction work in the South was in the 30s during the WPA.
Can't say 100% though.
Thomas Sowell. You know who that is?
No.
He was he learned under Milton Friedman, and he wrote a book about like facts, fallacies, and myths, and that's all about like how race myths and all that jazz. It's a good one. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like
is it racist to say something like that?
Well, see, why do we have to? I'm just why can't everyone just control what they can control, and that's it? And if someone says something to you, you know who you really are. So why do you have to make what other people say like hurt you?
Well, but what if who you are means that you have less opportunity than someone else? Not because what you can do or what you've accomplished or what you plan to accomplish. What if you are limited because of your last name or your ethnicity? Someone says, "Oh wait, you're German American? Sorry, you can't apply for this job."
Well, see, but you can still. It doesn't really happen. I don't think it really.
But it
I don't
happened
know.
for generations.
If it does,
I don't know.
That's terrible.
But
I mean,
but
no one's
they
talking
can't
about
control that. So what are you going to do? You got to find something, because that's not always going to happen, because there are good. I think there's a majority of the people are good. So if you can't control that, you better go somewhere else, and you better find something that will do it. If you control what you can control,
change like they do.
You know, I read where Thurgood Marshall, the first African American to be on the United States Supreme Court,
yeah.
I forget how many law schools he applied to, like 56, and he got into one on mistake. I think it was one where he didn't have to send a photograph, and he was admitted to University of Virginia Law School. And when he got there, they had like a gold cord in the cafeteria where he was not allowed to eat with any of the other students. He was not allowed to share a dormitory room with any other students. Even in the classroom, he was segregated. And he said, you know, I was the very first to get into this law school, and I felt fortunate that I got in, but I was hoping that there would be less discrimination than there was when I got there.
Right.
And I thought, how many people, after being turned down to 54 or 55 law schools, how many would persist? Most people would say, forget it, I'll get a job doing something else. That takes quite an ambition, a commitment to do that. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you wouldn't get turned down because you're Irish,
Right.
you know, or because you're German, or because you're English.
Well, you did, though. They once did. The Irish, the 5 points, and the Germans, and
Well, I feel like a lot of the questions that we're bringing up is because I think we all feel like, as white people, like Frank, Jacob, and I, you're definitely, you know, defending the point, but we just feel like we're being blamed.
Right.
And I don't hold any prejudice against anybody until I talk to them and find out if they're a good person or not. You know, just the same thing Martin Luther King was saying: judge not by the color of skin, but by the content of their character. And I feel like that's being done. So I guess I'm just frustrated that it's still Black Lives Matter versus like some police brutality happened. We need to get together. Like if that happened to a white guy, if it happened to an Indian guy, if it happened to anybody, I think we should all equally be as fired up and upset that happened. But
But we wouldn't be.
yeah,
That's the sad thing.
Yeah,
that
and
we
it's,
wouldn't. I mean, that
there's injustice from authority figures to me happen all the time.
And, you know, I shouldn't say they, we should take a page out of Martin Luther King's playbook where he had nonviolent protest. I saw a scratchy video one time where he was mobilizing his supporters, his followers, in like a high school gymnasium. And he was saying, listen, if you get struck with a rock or a bottle or a stick, or they turn the guard dogs loose on you or the fire hoses, do not fight back. It takes way more courage not to pick up the rock and throw it back than it does to pick it up and throw it back. And he says, if you pick it up and throw the rock back at the direction, he said, bad things are going to happen. You're going to not hit the person who threw it, and they're going to show on the 6 o'clock evening news an angry black person throwing a rock.
Yeah.
And they might have to go through 2 hours of video to find that, but they'll show it. He says, it's going to take more courage to not fight back. And I thought, well, he's right. That would be extremely difficult to
it's tough
just
either
walk
way, though, because obviously people are just so upset.
Right.
And some people are taking advantage of it for, I think, what is a good time to them, just being like shitheads. But I think a lot of the people who are being violent and breaking stuff are just like
angry.
Yeah, and they're trying to they're trying to really show that they are.
we've also been locked down for like 2 months. So it's like, I can imagine that there's a lot of pent up aggression like in everyone. So it's like probably half of it's just doing that because of that.
But then, you know, I'm watching the evening news and I see an African-American restaurant burned to the ground in Chicago.
It's like, what the heck?
300 miles from where the incident started. It's
Yeah.
like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything to anyone, and it's not going to help the entire situation. It's going to hurt it.
Yeah, and you just got to hope that leaders within the protest step up. And I've seen videos of it where people are like starting to break windows or something, and people come and stop them.
Yeah.
People within the protest, and
They need to do that.
yeah, it gives the whole movement a better name. And I hope that reform in some way does happen.
It's fishy to me because it's like there's all of the money that the Black Lives Matter is getting donated to, it's going to the Democratic Party.
I don't know if you could say a majority.
Yeah,
I've heard you say that, but you
can
hope that's not what's happening.
But there's a lot of websites that'll reinforce whichever you want it to reinforce.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the
the whole
problem. But
thing
like,
is
you can
sketchy,
follow
yeah.
the money trail yourself and literally
That could have
don't
been
go
a
and donate.
Republican-made website to make you turn and hate Democrats more, like all day.
But if any of it is, it shouldn't. I mean, you know, I understand.
I got on Craigslist last week before the Tulsa rally with Trump, and literally found Craigslist posts that they wanted COVID positive people to go to the Trump rally to pay them. And I was like, what? Like, and I was like, I didn't even think I was seeing it. Like, it was real. I was just like, what the heck? Like, this is an actual Craigslist post.
Yeah, that's
like,
crazy.
It's both sides are just going insane.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm fairly centrist libertarian. So it's just like,
I hope we just get through this election without lead in the air.
exactly.
I'm honest,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm on the same boat.
Yeah, because it's getting crazy.
Yeah. And that's the last thing I would want is bloodshed, because it's just like it never ends well. Look, like you said, the Civil War, 600,000 people died. Like that's a lot of good men dying for no reason.
Yeah, the ideals that they didn't even understand.
Exactly. Like there's never, to me, war is just pointless. Violence is really pointless. Like
When I was in Japan, I noticed Tokyo was a beautiful city and it looks new. And I said to this young female interpreter, I said, well, Tokyo is a lot newer city than I thought. It's beautiful. And she said, well, you guys helped with that. And I had forgotten that, you know, we firebombed Tokyo and just destroyed it. So, you know, 90% of the buildings are post 1945. You know, we forget that we were active participants.
yeah, we were imperialists, no doubt about it.
I mean, when the bomb drops in, whether it's Berlin or whether it would be Cleveland, or civilians died that had nothing to do with the reasons, the start.
Whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's
same
right.
thing.
There was like Churchill ended up like he ordered bombings on certain cities in Germany, and some of those cities were purely just civilians.
Dresden.
Yeah, exactly, and it was just it's war.
It's hard to understand that.
Yeah, it's like it's easy for us to look back on it and be like, oh, this is good and bad, but it's like I feel like half of in the moment. It's like you have so many lives in your hands. It's just I don't even know how you can even think of that.
And we've been very sheltered.
Exactly. It's like when I look at the video of the Rayshawn getting shot at the Wendy's. Like to me in the video it looks whatever, but like I don't even. Your adrenaline's pumping. You're in that search situation. Like it's hard to even think like. For me to say like, oh, he probably should have done this, because it's like there's so much randomness that can happen at that time.
Were you taught, Jacob, that if they turn on you with a taser, is that deadly force?
Oh yeah, because the thing is with the they're not trained. So if you continue to hold down the trigger, it's going to keep shocking you. You'll die eventually. Second of all, if you do get hit by a taser, you go down. Guess what's on your belt that you can't do anything about? That guy can just walk up, grab anything he wants.
But there were two police officers.
There were two police officers. I'm not, but I mean,
think the one actually was down on the ground though. So
They beat him up, both of them up.
He punched him in the face, but I mean,
The whole start of that is where I see the issue. He's just sleeping in a car, right?
In a Wendy's in a Wendy's drive-through.
Drive-through.
He was in the drive-through line.
had he
He was
pulled
in
over?
line,
Yes.
or was he?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in the
So he was probably too.
And he was on probation. And he was on probation.
Called the police.
Okay.
Had he been over there, you know, in a parking lot, probably sleeping it off, nothing would
No,
happen.
exactly.
Yeah, and another thing, I mean, the cops got to check on him. Like, oh, is this guy dead or is he dying or something? Like,
Right.
Well, did you watch
it's such a hard situation.
Oh,
If you watch the video after the guy shoots him, he runs up to him and he's like, he was like almost he you could hear it in his voice. He's like, keep breathing. Come on.
Well, he doesn't want to kill anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, now he's, and then the weird thing to me.
Did he get shot while he was running away?
Yes.
Yes. He shot the taser and started running.
But he did turn to shoot the taser at the police officer.
Okay.
Which then it's.
Now, you can shoot, if someone's running away, you still have the right to shoot him. In certain circumstances,
He should have shot him in
if
the
a guy
leg or
has a
something.
gun
If a guy
running
has a gun,
away,
if he's
or
armed,
as a deadly weapon, or as an intent to do harm to someone else, and if he's running away, you can pull the trigger.
this story is so loaded.
It's terrible.
Oh,
Well, the thing to
man.
me
And there's
is,
so
like,
many different
It's
ways
terrible.
to.
You should have shot him in the leg, first of all. Shoot him in the
don't-
leg or
yeah, but
something.
you
But
don't.
it's in the moment.
No,
It's in the moment.
you don't shoot to aim at the leg. You shoot to neutralize the threat.
Mm-hmm.
And the best place to
Center
shoot
mass.
is someone's center mass, because look, this thing is like that big.
Oh,
this
yeah.
thing is that big.
And if
and
you're
it,
worried about getting tased or
Well,
injured,
you know what's
if
going to
someone
happen.
gets shot here, they still have this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whatever that.
You
yeah.
shoot to neutralize the threat.
And
When
that's
the
what I
threat is
mean, like,
gone,
it was in the
stop,
moment.
help the person
What
like
a-
he did. You know,
What a
It's
terrible
such-
situation.
It is. It's a
Bad
terrible
situation.
situation.
Well, then they burned down that Wendy's. Like that to me is just like.
He liked the place. That's
It's
where he
like,
was.
yeah,
He was trying to
yeah.
get food there. Yeah.
and he was on.
He's had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just like it's those types of situations are purposely being like
elevated
elevated everywhere
that
just to
situation
like
is loaded.
yeah.
Especially right now. It'd be to be a cop right now, especially in any place with like a lot of black people, would just be the worst.
I remember a kid throwing rocks at Ohio State's campus when I was a kid on the news. He says it's interesting that they are trying to arrest me for being violent when they're trying to train me to be violent and go kill people overseas. The same government that wants me to go over to Vietnam and kill people are now angry at me for throwing.
Well, it's
That's an interesting
the
thing.
That
government.
is an
It's
interesting
because
point, yeah.
the government holds a monopoly on violence.
I mean, he didn't want to go, but he's going to be drafted.
Yeah.
And to protest, he's going to throw a rock to protest to show that he doesn't want to go, which doesn't excuse it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it raised the profile a great deal of the
The
movement,
action.
however,
Yeah.
you know. And I understand that, and that doesn't make it okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to burn down Wendy's. But yeah, there's a lot of anger.
Oh yeah, and that's the scary thing because it's like everyone acts irrational when they're angry too.
Everyone, just any emotional state. If you're in way too emotional, it's not going to end well.
No.
And it's unfortunate because you need emotions, but just people don't know how to control when and where to use
life or
that
death,
emotion.
like it was
Yeah.
for everyone involved. And
It's
even for the
tough.
guy who's about to go to Vietnam, that's life or death. Not just for him, but for the people he's shooting at. So it's
but
like,
see, like
what are you gonna do? It's
like-
life or
Right.
death.
everyone's calling for legislation stuff. What kind of legislation are you going to pass to change people's hearts and minds?
Can't.
You can't.
Can't legislate. It's like legislating intelligence. Good luck with that.
Exactly. Like what is the solution if you just want the government to do something about it? You can't change people's hearts and minds
Oh, it's gonna be
unless
tough.
it's tough. It's
Well,
so
the
hard.
Hearts and minds are already made up, and I think on that end, if you're a police officer right now, you're gonna hopefully hesitate a little bit.
Well, now
No,
Atlanta
you
has a
hesitate
blue
and you
flu.
die.
There's a blue
it's
flu
tough.
now.
You hesitate, you die.
Atlanta, there's
There's-
70% of them aren't going in.
yeah, there's a blue flu.
And one of the problems I think in our country is that the same people doing this toward the government will be quick to do this if they can somehow.
oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Not-
yeah.
not if you're-
absolutely.
not if
We
you're
have too much
being-
government. Get off my back. Wait a minute. Stimulus? Well,
not if
sure.
you- not if
Yeah,
you're-
yeah.
100%,
Give me something,
that's the
yeah.
truth.
If you're talking a lot of trash about the government giving handouts, like a bunch, and you took the stimulus check, you are a hypocrite.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
You
because-
gotta choose your battles, and that's a moral.
and everybody took it. Everybody.
I didn't take it.
Good. Get off my back. Wait a minute. I can
I
somehow
didn't have
benefit.
to though. I wasn't struggling to pay my
Good.
feed my family. So
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a crazy world that we live in right now. I mean, 2020 is. I'm 64 years old. It's the strangest year I've been in. I mean, really, 3 months ago, they had me convinced we're all going to die.
Yeah.
You know, I was afraid to leave the house. I was in my bedroom with a guitar. Leave me alone.
these are my last days.
You know? You know what I mean? But it was dark and gray outside.
Yeah. And it
cold.
felt like your
Yeah, it's
emotions
like-
were.
Yeah, it was weird.
And every day CNN said another 10,000 people are ready to die this second.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, give me an old rerun of Big Bang.
Anything else?
And it was very, very dark, you know. And so I understand, like you said, people wanting to get out. And I don't even want to hear it anymore, but we should listen.
Yeah.
We should listen to.
You gotta protect. It's like you gotta. It's just, to me, the biggest thing with the COVID is like the it's the hypocrisy with it. It's like you have the protests, but you can't go to church.
Yeah, all right. Well, how about the movie theater uptown Celina, which has been practicing social distancing since their existence? Not that they want to. But, and you go out to the boardwalk, and there's 300 people.
Oh yeah.
I was at the
Tighter than this,
Yeah.
you know. And I would say,
social distancing.
yeah, if I was the manager of the movie theater, I'd say, pick me.
Yeah.
When can I start? Because they have a sign up, you can come in and get popcorn Friday and Saturday night. But you can't go in and watch a movie. But you can go next door to the restaurant and order pizza. It's.
Then the whole non-essential versus, I think that was a wrong. They should have never done that. The whole.
I mean, everything's essential in this
1984-esque actions were taken for COVID and for the riots with curfews at certain times, stuff like that. Like that's.
I know.
That's a sketchy place.
There was
to
a
be.
couple times when I said, Mr. Governor, I think you're overreaching your authority here somewhat, sir. At the same time,
Maybe
pretty
just.
desperate times.
Same thing with Abe Lincoln back in the day.
Absolutely.
So.
And it's like they did the same during the influenza pandemic. They asked, but they didn't force anything upon anyone. They just said, "Hey, can you wear a mask?" And like, if you look at the pictures from the 1917, like if you look at the horse races or whatever, they all had masks on.
Football
still.
games.
Yeah, exactly. And like they were just, that's what I mean. It's like, if they just would have asked people, they would have just said, yeah. But it's like the American spirit
Or
to
they say no. And it depends
Yeah.
on what community you're in. If you say no for too long and everyone starts getting sick, you're going to be wearing the mask. But then it's too late. Like everyone's already sick. People are
Well,
dying,
even the Hong
obviously.
Kong flu of 1969,
I've heard of that. Yeah.
we lost, over 100,000 Americans with a population of 200 million. So you can do the ratio. We didn't cancel Woodstock or the NFL season or the Major League Baseball season. And really, maybe we should have. Maybe if they would have known more about social distancing and bacteria and, whatnot, but we didn't. And so there are comparisons between that and the Spanish flu of 1917 where we lose 650,000.
Yeah. And that's the thing to me is like, there's just so many, you could die anytime. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah, but you don't want to increase the odds.
You can increase it. I get that, but let's
wanna
just like
increase
there's
the
so many
odds.
other things that can kill you.
And
It's
you
like,
don't want to accidentally kill someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
true.
the other thing about the whole thing. It
With
sits
the masks.
dormant.
Yeah.
So like if I was just, go to the Moose and I had it and I just didn't know.
Well, no, didn't there a new study?
it's asymptomatic carriers that doesn't spread.
It doesn't
through
spread. There's a new
asymptomatic.
study from the CDC and the
World Health Organization.
yeah, they said that asymptomatic doesn't even spread it. I don't know if to believe it.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I was wondering, though, I think I read the same thing. I said, how could it not? So if I have the virus in me, even though I don't show symptoms, how can a sneeze or a cough not infect someone else?
If it's on the droplets and you put the
It's
droplets
well,
in
it's
your
just
mouth.
how it's. I mean, well, then they're saying that it's starting to become another outbreak in China. They're starting to lock down. I have a buddy that lives in China. I'll text him every now and then, and he said they started locking down again, and it's just like they have no idea why.
Well, didn't Florida close again here, too? They opened and now they're closed
Yeah.
again because of the spikes going right back up.
Which I feel like it's just
And Fauci says, wait till the fall, it's going to come back. Of course, he's the same guy that said we're going to have 2 to 4 million deaths
exactly
in the United States.
Well, that's the thing. I was watching this thing since December because like you could literally I was
Frank
reading
was early
yeah.
on the train.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
reading articles about it in December about this Wuhan virus getting released there, and it changed so much throughout that time. Like in January, there were so many reports saying, well, first of all, in January, India came out and said, hey, we tested this. This is a SARS virus cut with HIV. And that's why it's so viral. It's because it was cut with HIV. And they said that's what they were saying in January. And then the lab from the Wuhan lab, a doctor from China came out and said, hey, I was working on this type of SARS strain on bats. It got bit, blah, blah, blah. He disappears. This is in January. Russia comes out at the end of January and says, hey, we are peer reviewing India's study, and yes, this is definitely cut with HIV.
So you're saying they made it?
They don't. I don't know. That's what I think. I mean, you don't know. The evidence is showing that it was not maybe not necessarily made it on purpose, but they spread it.
I wonder how many people died in China or died in
Yeah,
Russia.
you don't know. That's the sad thing about it is there's probably it was very destructive in China. Like I watched hundreds of videos of people just dying on the streets.
And
like,
the last I saw that Russia had reported very few. You know, it's like, how does it stop at the border there?
That's a weird move to take as a nation to me. Like, are we not? Do you not have that much humanity to like be,
it's the money.
Turn the cards over.
Yeah, like come on, we're all people.
Right when you have that outbreak, then you got to close stuff, and then the money's not coming in. North Korea had 0 cases. They had one case. One person tested positive, and then they killed him.
Well, I have just a hunch there's more people than just he.
Yeah, but that's what they did. That's what they showed on their. I was reading they have like a national news that they post. The government runs
you're
it.
listen to North Korea's national news.
I mean, they said they executed him.
People sit there and go,
Yeah. Well, they are pretty isolated, so I bet they did all right.
I saw a guy being interviewed. It's probably February. Interviewing an epidemiologist, so it's a reporter, and so this reporter says, "So is this an existential threat?" And soaking in like existential threat. That's very existentialism. My philosophy class, like people's existence. You're talking about the human race.
Very loaded.
He said, "I don't think so."
I think the problem with how it was so overblown because all of the computer generated data for the virus in January was all saying like this is going to kill 2 million people if it gets into America, and all of this just predictive software was saying this, and so everyone ran with it, and then
of course that's what the news.
Well, yeah, fear will always get
it's
more
like trying
clicks.
to track a hurricane.
Yeah,
you see those like 1,000 little arrows. We don't know. They might as well just say
chaos.
we just
Like,
don't
you
know.
can't track chaos.
We don't know.
I'm scared that there's actually going to be a real virus that's going to like mess some people up actually, and then they're going to start locking things down. Like, oh, this is just another one of those coronavirus
Especially
things.
in our community, man. Most cities take it real seriously.
Yeah.
Oh, how about the cities that have arrested people for not following their quarantine, and they're tracking them?
That's weird.
That's
So I think it was in Washington State. They were supposed to be quarantined. Lady went to the grocery store. She came home. There's a cop waiting. Young lady, we're going to have to arrest you for not,
Now
so
that
if they're
is
tracking them, I mean, think of that page we're turning also.
Oh no,
That's like
there's
straight
a
out of-
lot of weird things happening right now.
1984 is. I feel like I'm just watching 1984 start to.
George Orwell again, right?
Yeah.
And that whole thing is scary too. I mean, I can put on here "don't allow."
But if you really trust it.
I don't
It's
even
like,
do that anymore because it doesn't matter whether I say "don't allow" or not. They know exactly where I'm at.
And that's the scariest thing about it is there's so much
Which they're
distrust.
probably not looking, but if they do try to look, they will be able to find it.
Right.
There's too much skepticism. I feel like that's a symptom of not good times. Skepticism against authority.
Well, I mean, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem is like you can't, like you said, it's reason.
If someone, is at my house in a uniform when I come home from here saying, well, we tracked you and you went to Neptune and we know that violated, that's
Scary. And that's just weird. Hopefully it never comes to that.
we were talking earlier about someone not being able to make change because they use a calculator or follow directions. We're way past that.
With our phones. Well, you guys want to call it there?
Yeah. Billy, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No,
Anything else
thanks
you
for
wanna say
inviting me.
for
This
people?
is interesting.
It was a really good talk. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate your insight on a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for
I know
having
we
me,
got
guys.
a little fired up there for a minute.
I'm going to try to follow you now and see what's going on and watch this.
Thank you.
We're going to try to continue this and get some good people.
You'll have to
on
show me how to follow it. But
Oh, yeah, we would definitely will.
okay. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And remember to follow us on YouTube, BitChute, Spotify, Apple Music, Facebook, and check us out there.
Thanks for watching, guys.
And peace.